Welcome to the New Mexico State University Amy Goldman-Fowler Chili Pepper Institute Teaching Garden. Every year we plant this garden to show the wonders of chili peppers. I'm going to give you guys a tour of our teaching garden this morning and show you everything that we like to showcase on an annual basis out here. We have over 150 different varieties of chili peppers from 4 of the main domesticated species, including Capsicum annum, Capsicum Cayennes, Capsicum Bacon, and Capsicum frutescens. Capsicum annum comprises over half of the garden out here, and it includes the 5 main types that we grow on an industry level here in New Mexico, including New Mexican red and green, paprika, jalapenos, and cayennes. The Capsicum Cayennes include our super hots like the bootjalokia or the ghost pepper, the Carolina Reaper, and the Trinidad Moruga scorpion. We also have Capsicum Bacons, which houses our ahis out of Latin America, and Capsicum frutescens, which has the Tabasco pepper, which of course makes the famous Tabasco sauce. So the first variety that we're going to look at today is the Chiltepin, or the wild bird pepper. These peppers, well, all peppers originated in South America, somewhere between the areas of Bolivia and Brazil in the Amazon rainforest. And they started out looking much like what we see here, these very small, berry-like fruits. And the really cool thing about chiltepins is they have a really neat symbiotic relationship with birds. Birds do not have the receptors to feel the heat from capsaicin the way mammals do. So they can eat lots of these, get lots of nutrition from them, and then move them around as they fly around. They deposit the seeds because their digestive systems do not harm the seeds like mammals do. And it can grow into another plant the next season. So that's kind of how the wild bird peppers got moved out of their center of origin and away from the areas of Bolivia and Brazil. Then the indigenous people started to cultivate them and move them even further. And this happened thousands of years ago. Today, they're being cultivated all over the world in almost every country in the world. Another variety that we're going to look at today is NuMex Easter. We have a chili breeding program here at NMSU that dates back over 100 years. We've been developing pepper varieties for a very long time here. Anything that has the NuMex in front of its name, the NuMex, was developed at New Mexico State University. This is a really neat variety because it recently won an AAS award. And AAS stands for All American Selections. And it's a group that takes plants from all over the United States, grows them, and determines how well they grow. And this one was determined to grow very well in all kinds of different climates and environments. And so we won the AAS award. The other really interesting thing about ornamental, this is an ornamental pepper, and the interesting thing is that because it's called an ornamental pepper, a lot of people think that it's inedible or that it's poisonous. And no peppers are poisonous. It's just that this one has been bred to be pretty, so not a lot of attention was paid on the heat or the flavor. So they usually don't have a lot of flavor and are very, very hot. Ornamental chili peppers usually have really neat color transitions. This one has a color transition that starts with this lilac color, it then turns to yellow and then orange. And the really interesting thing about this orange color is it's generally very nutritious and contains a compound called carotenoids, and that's what makes it orange. The next thing we're going to talk about in the garden is New Mexican type chilies. The breeding program at New Mexico State University has been going on for over 100 years and was started by a gentleman with the name of Fabian Garcia. He was the first Hispanic researcher at New Mexico State University back when it was called the College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts. He was the first in his graduating class that studied chili peppers, and what he wanted to do was create a more standard chili pepper. And what was being grown at the time were landrace type chilies like the one that you see here. And they're very small, they have a thin wall, and they're usually very, very hot. And he wanted to standardize that and make more uses for it. So what he did was he took the New Mexico landrace chili and a Mexican pasilla chili and he hybridized them and made cross-pollinations. And then he made selections over many, many years and finally came to the conclusion that he had a longer type green pepper and it had thicker walls and was much milder. And this is actually one of his very first released variety here at New Mexico State University. Dr. Garcia's work with New Mexico No. 9 led the way for even better chili peppers down the road. The NuMex Big Jim was actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest pepper ever grown. And when it was in the Guinness Book of World Records, they actually had a chili that was 13 inches long. These peppers are kind of our standard in the New Mexico chili industry these days, and they're much bigger, much thicker fleshed, have heat levels that range from mild to hot, and is one of the #1 crops here in New Mexico. Another large industry in New Mexico is Cayennes. This here is NuMex Nematodor, and it is a cayenne pepper variety that was developed here at New Mexico State University. And it is resistant to what we call nematodes, which are tiny microscopic worms that live in the soil. But they like to get into the roots of plants and cause all kinds of nasty things to happen. So this one is actually very resistant to those tiny little microscopic worms and helps us grow our cayenne industry here in New Mexico. A really interesting thing about cayennes here in New Mexico is that we produce most of what's called the cayenne mash for Louisiana hot sauce. So we grow the cayennes, we harvest them, we chop them up, mix them with a little bit of vinegar and salt, let that ferment, and then that product is called cayenne mash. The cayenne mash is then taken to Louisiana by tanker loads and then bottled and called Louisiana hot sauce. So anytime you've had Louisiana hot sauce, you've been eating New Mexico grown cayennes. All right, now that we've covered all the capsicum atoms in the garden, let's talk about Capsicum chinense. Capsicum chinense is the species that houses all of the super hots as well as kind of more known ones like the habaneros and the Scotch bonnets. A really interesting thing about New Mexico State University is it discovered the world's first super hot chili, which is called the Butjalokia or the ghost pepper. That's this one here. And it was the first one to reach over 1 million Scoville heat units. Now, we didn't develop this. This is a landrace out of Assam, India, but we did discover it as the world's first super hot chili. We have the Trinidad Moruga Scorpion, which is this one here, and that one comes in at 2 million Scoville heat units, so it's twice as hot as a ghost pepper. And we also have the Carolina Reaper, which is now in the Guinness Book of World Records for the hottest chili on the planet, and this one comes in just over 2 million Scoville heat units. Another species that we have growing in the garden is Capsicum Bacon, and it houses all of the ahis out of Latin America. We aren't real familiar with those here in New Mexico, and they're very different from what we grow here in New Mexico. They're usually very small, very hot, and have very different flavor and heat profiles. They also have a very wide range of pod shapes. This one, the omnicolor, is very long and straight, comes to a point. And then this one is called the ubatuba, or the Christmas bell, and it looks a lot like a bell, and hence the name. The last species we're going to talk about in the garden today is Capsicum frutescens, and this is Tabasco pepper. Tabasco pepper was made famous by the McElhenney Company out of Louisiana, famous makers of Tabasco sauce. And they're much smaller fruits than what we're used to in our New Mexican types and even the jalapenos and cayennes. They're very small, and they have a really pretty color transition as well. They start off kind of this lime green color, turn to yellow, orange, and eventually red. And this is the pepper that makes Tabasco sauce.